Welcome to Let's Play Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Now here's a game that I loved growing up. So, let's jump right into it. Now, if you've never played a Castlevania game, or at least a standard traditional one, this one's a little different. Many of you may be familiar with the term Metroidvania. This is a game genre term that was coined from two games, Super Metroid and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. This is because these two games are both renowned for exploring a giant map, accruing upgrades, and then going back and exploring things you couldn't before. This game is one of the most famous for it, not only because it, just controls well, is put together quite well, and sounds great, but because it was Castlevania. Everyone knew what this game was. At least, they thought they did. The original Castlevanias were generally side-scrollers that were renowned for brutal difficulty, whereas this one really broke that mold and became more like a Metroid game, which, at the time, would have made sense. So, here on the menu, you have a couple very simple options. You can select your file, change your name, copy the file, and delete a file. Pretty stock standard. Now, originally, Castlevania Symphony of the Night came out on the PlayStation. I personally am playing this on the Xbox 360 version, specifically on my Xbox One. You may have been able to tell that based on the buttons down below. I do own this game on the PlayStation 1, but my disc doesn't work incredibly well, so I figured for this playthrough, we would use this version. Besides, it's not any different, really. The biggest difference is that the ending song was changed due to legal copyright reasons. Otherwise, you'll still get the same voice acting you otherwise would have on the PlayStation 1 original. So, I thought it was a pretty good compromise. Otherwise, speaking of this being a PlayStation 1 game, these file selects here, these would be different on the PlayStation version. Basically, wherever you had your memory card at the time would be where these were. If you had more or less memory, these little slots would or wouldn't be there. So, because we're using a newer console that has almost infinitely more storage than a tiny memory card did at the time, we have all the slots available to us. So, that's pretty nice. Otherwise, let's pick a nice file, and we can enter a name. It doesn't really matter what you enter, so we'll go with the stock standard bread. Beautiful. Alright, final stage. We're doing pretty great. So, for those of you who don't know, Castlevania Symphony of the Night is a direct sequel to Castlevania Rondo of Blood, or, depending on your translation, Dracula X. So, this is the end of that game.
Die, monster! You don't belong in this world.
It was not by my hand that I'm once again given flesh. I was called here by humans who wish to pay me tribute.
Tribute? You steal men's souls and make them your slaves.
Perhaps the same could be said of all religions.
Your words are as empty as your soul. Mankind ill needs a savior such as you.
What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets. But enough talk. Have at you!
And man, there's that iconic line. Now, let me tell you, this opening fight actually matters a lot more than some people know. Depending on how fast you are, how efficient you are, what sub-weapon you use, where you go as Richter, how you fight, you can change Alucard's starting stats for the main game. Because obviously, this is a flashback to tell you what you need to know. It was Richter Belmont, the legendary vampire hunter, who succeeded in finally ending the menace of Count Dracula, Lord of the Vampires, who had been brought back from the grave by the dark priest Shaft. However, one night, 4 years later, under the glare of a full moon, Richter mysteriously vanished. With no idea of where to begin her search, Maria Renard set out to look for him. It was then that fate intervened. Castlevania, the castle of Dracula, which is rumored to appear once every century, suddenly materialized from out of the mist as if to show her the way. Meanwhile, powerful forces were struggling for the soul of a man named Alucard, the very same Alucard who had teamed up with Trevor Belmont to battle his immortal father, Count Vlad Tepes Dracula. Alucard, in order to purge the world of his own cursed bloodline, had submerged his vampiric powers and entered into what was supposed to be an eternal slumber. But now he is awake and aware of the evil once again at work in his homeland. The time has come again for the forces of good and evil to engage in their ancient battle. Dracula's castle beckons for you, and no man can say who shall emerge victorious. For this is Castlevania. Specifically, let's play Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Oh, baby. Now, like I was saying, depending on what you do as Richter, Alucard here will have very different starting stats. Normally, I believe he would start with about 70 HP, I believe 20 MP and 50 hearts, as well as a base of, I think, 6 or 7 strength, 6 con, and some amount of interluck. The numbers ultimately really don't matter, but for early game, it is nice to have a little extra boost. Now, this is another huge difference between this and other, at the time, traditional Castlevanias. This game has leveling and stats. Every Castlevania up to this point was basically a one sit-down playthrough where you played through the whole game and that was that. They were brutally difficult and this was unheard of. So it's kind of cool that they changed things up so much. Otherwise, here we are. We have a whole bunch of different equipment. The Alucard sword, Mother's family heirloom. The Alucard shield, strong versus all attacks. The Dragon Helm, which lowers enemy defense. The Alucard mail, which resists fire, lightning, and ice. The Twilight Cloak, which is the best cloak in the game. It gives you a bonus of plus 10 constitution. Very nice. And, of course, the Necklace of J. Pretty darn good. This is all really great. Now, otherwise, we have relics, which, yeah, we don't have any yet. This will change very soon. And otherwise, we have system settings. Here you can remap all the buttons, but honestly, I think the game's base configuration is amazing, so I wouldn't mess with it. If you want, you can change the window color. I don't feel a need. I love this classic blue. Kind of feels like a Final Fantasy. We also, of course, have sound settings. We'll put it on stereo just so that way it sounds a little better in your ears. And then otherwise, we have hidden settings that won't reveal themselves for a long while. Otherwise, into the game, you control Alucard here. He's pretty darn cool. He can jump pretty high, he can duck, he can swing his sword. Heck, he can even attack down diagonally, which is pretty cool. If you do a quarter circle, you can perform a special move with this specific sword. And if you hold B, you can pull out your shield. Now, the interesting thing about this is basically the top slot here is your X button or your left button, and the B button is whatever this secondary slot is. Generally, I always put your attacking weapon here and the defending weapon here, though there are some cases where you may not want that. You can have 2 different weapons equipped, or you could even have a weapon that requires 2 hands where you can only use it in 1 slot, basically. It won't let you equip something else. It's pretty cool. So there's a whole lot of variety in how you play will really vary. Otherwise, the triggers don't really do anything, except the left trigger brings up the map. The map is one of the biggest aspects of this game, as it is a massive game. Your percentage is also basically directly tied to exploring this. Eventually, we want to aim for 206%, which means exploring 1,890 rooms. That's a lot. Luckily, this game, although it feels big, isn't actually all that long if you know what you're doing, so don't worry too much. Otherwise, The only other button we haven't really showed off is the top button, which allows you to backdash. This is meant to be a defensive maneuver. Like, oh, I'm about to be hit, so, ooh, backdash away. See? Very cool. But it can be a bit abusive. Backdashing is a little faster than just normally moving, as you can see. However, you can move even faster. Should you backdash, you can basically cancel the input by holding your shield out. So if you backdash and then immediately press shield, you can chain them, like so. Now by doing this, you can move exceptionally fast, just like this. Now unfortunately, while it is much faster, it makes a lot of noise on the controller. This same technique is also one of the reasons I really like the default layout. It lends itself to doing this technique really well. Because of how it's set up, you can basically just plop your thumb down on top of both buttons at once and just kind of mash it like that. So long as you're hitting both the shield button and backdash button, you'll go pretty fast. And there, we have our first of many level ups. Every time you level up, your stats go up a bit. Very nice. Now, you might notice, we have HP, which is our hit points, MP, which is for magic, and hearts, which are the traditional Castlevania sub-weapon ammunition. As you can notice, we really don't have a sub-weapon. Ooh, a nice little pot roast. A cute reference to the fact that in traditional Castlevania, they hid these in walls for the hero to heal. In this game, they work a little different. In order to heal, you need to equip it, and then you can throw it on the ground and pick it up. Very nice. Unfortunately, it is one-time use, so, oh well, keep it in mind. Otherwise, a lot of enemies in this game are pretty standard Castlevania enemies. There are some that are pretty much exclusive to this game or later ones, but everything you see in this beginning feels right at home. The zombies, the bats, even the mermen. They're right out of Castlevania 1 pretty much. It's really cool seeing how this series has evolved and changed like this. Oh, you can't go this way. Which is why the map is very helpful. If you ever lost, at a pull of a trigger, you can see where you're going. Very useful. Otherwise, generally, breaking candles is how you get hearts. It's pretty good. Now, you might be wondering, what's the MP for? Well, if you noticed, my goodness, if I can get out of the water, when we use this quarter circle forward sword attack, it uses some of our MP. A lot of special hidden moves that aren't listed anywhere will use magic like that. There's also other secret commands that you can input to perform spells. If you also notice, when Alucard's MP is full, he'll do that little blue glow. So, the first spell I would like to bring up is Dark Metamorphosis. You basically activate it by doing a half circle from left to right and then attacking. I believe you can also, you can activate it by doing the opposite as well. Some spells allow you to do either or. Other spells really are stingy with this, so you gotta be careful. Now, Dark Metamorphosis. With this spell active, whenever an enemy bleeds on you, you'll regain a little bit of HP, lending to the fact that Alucard is in fact a Dhampir, or a half-breed vampire. So, blood heals him if he's under the right circumstances. Otherwise, another useful spell is the Hellfire spell. This is actually something we would have seen Dracula do in the beginning if we hadn't so rudely interrupted it. In order to do it, you press up, do a quarter circle forward, and then you can move, teleport, and shoot fire. It's pretty useful, not only for damage early on, but to position yourself. You're completely invincible when you do that. Now, if we do it again, when you appear, if you hold up, you'll get the Hellfire version. It's pretty darn good. Or, well, maybe it's the Dark Meteor Ball version. Whatever you want to call it, it's still called Hellfire. So, you get the big ball version or the fire version. Take your pick. They're both pretty useful. The other spell I want to bring up is Summon Spirit. This is a much more niche one, but it can have its uses. Basically, you press left, right, up, down, and then attack. And you summon a little spirit. Now, it doesn't look incredibly useful, but if we go down to our favorite mermen, it will home in on them and do some decent damage. It's a nice range option if you really don't have anything better. At this point in the game, that's pretty much everything you can do. Unless, oh yeah, no, actually, our MP is high enough. At 20 MP, there's another spell you can do. If you hold up for about, I like to say give or take 3 to 4 seconds, and then you do a full circle down from the, or toward the right, it can be a little stingy with how it's performed. I find that sometimes the spell just takes a minute to really activate. Again, sometimes these button inputs on a circle, or not on a circle, on a control stick are a little finicky to input, but I feel like if you do it kind of slow sometimes, they have a higher chance of activating. So come on now. And for whatever reason, I always struggle with this one. I don't know why. It might just be because I'm not deliberate enough with how I'm using the stick. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong. I could also just be not waiting long enough. That's very possible too. Well, I'll try to do it later. Point is, it's another spell you can do. It's basically the Summon Spirit spell, just it summons 4 instead of 1. I never used this. I mean, heck, as evidence, I can't even cast it properly. Give it one more shot. Whoops. No. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. No. Still doesn't want to do it. There it is. So yeah. For reference, I think I did almost the same identical input like 4 times and it barely worked. So, yeah, not my favorite spell. Still, it's there if you need it. Huh?
Alucard, what is your business here?
I've come to put an end to this.
Still befriending mortals. I'll not ask you to return to our side, but I demand you cease your attack.
I will not.
You shall regret those words. We will meet again. What?
So, yeah. Welcome to classic Metroid and, at this point, Metroidvania fare. You start with a bunch of really powerful equipment, and then you lose it all. So yeah, hopefully you didn't like any of those really powerful starting items. At this point, you're down to basics, which means you got your fists. Now, you can't really do the dash cancel as effectively. You can still kinda do it, but frankly, just normally backdashing is gonna be faster than anything else. So, get used to seeing me backdash a lot, just because it is so much faster. Now, luckily, this enemy here shows that enemies can drop equipment in gear. It may not be nearly as good as what you had, but frankly, you'll take what you can get. So there we go. We have a sword again. Thank goodness. And the Red Rust, which is an example of a two-handed weapon. And, there's a bit of an interesting thing with this. Because our attack is lower than 10 with this specific weapon, it can jam sometimes, like that. This is not a phenomenal weapon at all, and frankly, I pity anyone who did use it. In fact, this two-handed weapon is weaker than the one-handed short sword, so I really can't see a reason to ever equip it. Otherwise, right here, we have our first of many save rooms. And man, I gotta tell you, it's always a relief seeing these. Now, the nice thing about save rooms, they fully heal you and restore your MP. They don't, however, restore your heart count, so you'll have to earn that. Otherwise, coming up pretty soon, we'll actually be able to see what the hearts do, though we can collect them, and, Speaking of hearts, there's a nice little permanent upgrade there, but we can't get it yet. Anyways, back to what I was saying. Although we can collect them, we don't have a way to use them yet. Luckily, that's fixed relatively quickly with the Cube of Zoe, our first of many relics. So if we come in here, this causes items to materialize. It sounds vague, but what it means is you can now find sub-weapons within candles. We won't have any yet, but once we find them, it'll be pretty nice. Also, I shouldn't gloss over this room. This room right here was a loading room. Back on the PlayStation, they needed time to load areas, so they had this cute little CD room, and it let the system load the next area. This is the Alchemy Laboratory, which I think we kind of missed it because I immediately backed into the room we came in. So, oopsies. Normally they have this cool little, text that shows up and is like, hey, you're in this cool new place. But hey, it's not a big deal. Otherwise, here we can get the Hide Curious. My goodness, the Hide Curious. I'm so excited to actually be playing the game. I'm jumbling up my words. I tell ya, this is a game that I just love playing. It's so darn fun. It looks great, sounds great. I mean, seriously, I can't say enough good about it. There's kind of a reason it became a industry standard. Otherwise, we get the best item early game, the Leather Shield. Although it doesn't do much for you in terms of defense, it allows you to move quickly again, which, let me tell you, is worth its weight in gold. I love being able to move fast, and let me tell you, it is one of my favorite things. Otherwise, nice little save point. Now, the other nice thing, on the map, all save points will be highlighted red. So, if you ever need a heal or an MP refill, just look on your map for a save point. Ooh! And here's the first of many sub-weapons. This is the classic Castlevania axe. For a couple hearts, you can throw an axe that arcs overhead. Very useful. Notably, too, that shows that enemies can drop sub-weapons. It's pretty nifty. For now, we'll take the dagger. Also, another basically classic. My goodness, if I can stop tripping over my words, another classic Castlevania feature is breakable floors and walls. Now, it was more prevalent in the original games, just because that's where you would find hidden items and heals. But in this game, you'll get plenty of good permanent upgrades, like life increases, heart count increases, even gear. They're pretty nice, and let me tell you, there's quite a few of them hidden throughout the game. Very nice. Nice heart max up. Now, a lot of these early items aren't going to do too much for you, but you still want to go out of your way to collect them. Besides, if nothing else, that's map completion that you're going to want to be filling out. And let me tell you, this map takes a lot of effort to actually get filled in. You're not going to be able to fully fill it out until a fair way into the game. So, get used to seeing little spots and splotches that are missing. That's also why I haven't really worried about getting every little square right now. We'll be coming back much later in order to fill them in, back when we have new abilities that will allow us to get even further than we could before. So, don't worry. If I don't go somewhere right away or, explore something immediately, it's probably because we'll be back later and be able to do it much more efficiently. Anyways, here we find the cloth cape. Very useful. If you notice, it actually changes his cloak, which is really cool. Get used to seeing this one, because it's pretty much one of the best capes for a while, because it's one of the only capes you get for a while. So, get used to seeing it. Very nice. Now, one other thing I want to bring up is once we level up enough and hit 50 MP, we get one of my favorite spells in the game. But that'll be a little while, so just keep it in mind. Otherwise, we'll keep continuing this way. Ooh, a nice little save room. Beautiful. Again, I'll always take a free heal and MP refill. Now, otherwise, I haven't been saving at them just because it takes a while for the game to actually save, and I want to keep things moving. Otherwise, we can grab the axe here, which I think I will be. Down there on that little, other exit is just a dead end for now, but we'll be coming back to it much later. So, don't worry. I say much later. For now, we have our first boss fight. So, basically, let them have it. This is where a lot of the fun of the Castlevanias come into. A lot of the early games are known for their brutal difficulty, huge platforming, and of course, the awesome boss fights. I feel Symphony of the Night was really the first game that actually emphasized on these being a lot of fun to do. Some of the earlier games were kind of a chore and brutally difficult. Luckily for us, Alucard is more than equipped to handle most foes. In fact, there probably won't be a single foe that we really struggle on, so I'm not terribly worried. Otherwise, with the first boss down, let's keep on moving. Ooh. And man, what a cool animation. Not only just from, what it looks, but the sprite work. All the sprites and stuff that are in this game just look awesome. I mean, seriously. There's a reason this game kinda is lauded as one of the better games. Otherwise, we have a nice little elevator. I believe this unlocks a shortcut for us later. My goodness. Still tripping over my words, because man, I can't believe I'm actually playing one of my favorite games. Still, by coming here, we get the sunglasses, which are, pretty okay. An early defense increase for lowering our intelligence. I'll take it. Now, intelligence is interesting. In most games, that's the magic stat, and that's no different than in this game. It does affect how much damage your magic deals, generally. However, it also affects how much damage your sub-weapons do. So the axe, the dagger, and any of the other ones we'd find. And here is somewhere we could have gone a little earlier, but you may as well wait and come here now. Otherwise, we get the Basilard, which is a very fast little dagger. I quite like this weapon just because it has some pretty good speed early on. Yeah, intelligence is basically the sister stat to strength. Strength affects how much damage your weapons deal. Intelligence affects all the other damage. It's not a bad stat, but early on, when you have very little MP, I don't focus on it. In fact, I really never focused on it, because frankly, you're going to be doing most of your baddie dispatching via jumping, attacking, and that's basically it. So, get used to actually fighting as Alucard rather than relying on his spells. Though they can be helpful in a pinch, especially that one that you get at 50 MP. So, keep your eye out for it. Ooh, nice little save room. I don't think we need a heal, but hey, could have been cool. Otherwise, keep on going. And as you can see, there are so many little hidden areas already that we can't explore yet. It really is hopefully piquing your interest and making you, curious about what's forward. That's one of the things I love about Metroidvania games. They constantly keep you just enticed with, ooh, what's this? Where's that go? Ooh, and here we have a new sub-weapon, the marble. I really like the marble because it bounces all over the place, and because it attacks down in that little arc, it's really useful for setting up kills. I love the marble. It is, however, horribly annoying. Between its ting, 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 and ting, it's a fine sub-weapon that does pretty good damage and is very useful for what it is, but it is annoying. And there we have status conditions. Not only can you be, normal, but you can get poisoned, cursed, all sorts of different things. Poison, I think, generally lowers the damage you deal. It's annoying, but so few enemies can do it, it's not a big deal. Otherwise, I believe we have a new area. The Marble Gallery. And man, there's that cat classic Castlevania music, and a classic Castlevania sub-weapon, the Holy Water. We saw it in the intro with Richter, but when using it normally, it drops a little fire area that does damage. Now, something you may have noticed, when Richter used the Holy Water, the flame went along the ground in kind of a wave. Alucard doesn't get that same effect, which is interesting. A lot of the effects that you're used to from classic Castlevania may be a little different than what you're used to for, say, Alucard. I mean, look, there's only so many ways you can throw a knife and so many ways you can chuck an axe, but turns out an unholy being using a holy item such as holy water works a little different. There are a couple other items like that do different things for Alucard than they might have for Richter. For instance, one of the items you could have gotten as Richter if you broke that first candle stick in the beginning would have been a cross. The cross functions like a boomerang for Richter. However, for Alucard, he doesn't get that same effect. Instead, he gets a giant nuke ability, basically, that does a huge pillar of damage in front of him. I think it takes something ridiculous, like 100+ hearts or something like that, so don't expect to ever really see me use it. But it's a pretty powerful effect, all things considered. Notably, that effect is actually something that Richter himself could do too. With enough hearts, and hey, another new relic, he could press up and then the attack button to use essentially a super move. That's the same thing we did in the beginning with Hydrostorm and the Holy Water, but I didn't feel like using the cross because the Holy Water gives different stats and it makes it much easier to not get hit, which again affects your stats as Alucard. Otherwise, that relic. That is the Spirit Orb, which shows enemy damage. It's a little misleading by saying enemy damage specifically, but it shows you damage numbers. So the damage you deal and take. It's pretty nice. I'd recommend grabbing it now, though technically you never do need to grab it. It's a completely optional item. Still, you may as well, right? Plus, being able to see your damage numbers really helps you figure out if what you're doing is working or not. So as we can see, hitting an enemy in different areas deals different damage. An attack to the chest deals about 5, and in some cases, you can deal 9. Plus, depending on your sub-weapon, you can see just how much damage it does. It's a pretty nice upgrade early on that really helps you understand just how powerful or weak you are. So, keep it in mind. Otherwise, I mean, you can turn it off if you don't like seeing it, but frankly, it's just such a useful tool, I don't see why you would. Otherwise, the way we're going right now doesn't give you any real progress in the game, but this is kind of the best time to explore here, so I like to just get it out of the way. Ah. Hello, Mr. Guy. Woo. Careful. I want to say this guy actually does a fair amount of damage, and he's pretty much one of the only ways you can die pretty easily early in the game. So, be a little careful with him, but shouldn't be anything you can't handle. And, hey, remember where we got the Cube of Zoe? We're back. Otherwise, if you hop down here, you can land on this little platform and... Oh, I missed the jump. Oh well. We'll be back later for that anyways. Otherwise, this leads us perfectly back to a nice little save room. Ironically, the first one we got to. Still, I think for the first episode, that'll do nicely. Information overload, a backstory overload, and of course, all this beautiful sprite work and music. I think that'll do rather nicely. Next time we play Castlevania Symphony of the Night, we'll continue exploring Castlevania. As always, I'm Brad. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.